Hey guys, John here, launching a new channel, America's Army News, where I want to cover any and all upcoming information about the new America's Army 5, as well as cover some history of America's Army and current America's Army Proving Grounds news. So news has been pretty dead on the America's Army front for a while now, but finally we got something from a new dev that we heard about on August 14th called AA Hollywood. We had not heard of him before. I can't find any correlation to him in games past, but he finally commented on a page that said, "What do you want to see in 2019?" Where he said that he is new and he's looking to be more transparent with what is happening internal to the development team and the community. Since his debut, he has not only confirmed that Tots, the old community manager, is gone and he is replacing him, but confirmed that they are starting to work on an America's Army 5. So for the rest of the video, I'm going to be documenting the statements that Hollywood has made, as well as providing comment/feedback as a longtime America's Army player. Whiplash creates a thread discussing what he'd like to see in the new America's Army, creates a list of requests / what he believes are demands for the new America's Army version, not knowing at this time that there is a new one in the works. And Hollywood responds. Dougal makes a few statements regarding the disorganization of the America's Army development team and what they've released so far. Hollywood responds that he's not wrong, that things are changing, and that being free is not an excuse to create a poor quality game. He then goes on to make a joke about the failure of a game, America's Army 3, and he gives a little hint that UE, Unreal Engine 4, is pretty great. He then goes on to describe what the goal of the Army Game Studios is, which is to get the US Army intellectual property in front of as many eyes as possible. And he says that we will see another America's Army video game. This is not entirely new news, as we know that they are working on a World of Tanks style game, and many others going on internal to the game studios that are not for public use. Hollywood then quells our fears from a previous comment talking about that World of Tanks game, saying that it's a completely separate project. He then goes out to ask the community what we want to know about the future game. Yes, Hollywood states that they are already working on the next version of this game, and he promises updates for America's Army Proving Grounds. He then goes on to hint at an America's Army Battle Royale style game like Fortnite or PUBG, and he says that it has been suggested. LOL. He then hints that it's a little too late for UE4 now, which is a little problematic because I don't believe there's Unreal Engine 5 yet. But he says that they pulled improvements for America's Army PG, which is currently in Unreal Engine 3, from UE4 that has been helpful performance-wise. He then kind of backtracks, saying it would be in Unreal Engine 4. We finally get some history on AA Hollywood, saying that he's been in the Army Game Studio since '06, and he doesn't have time for any drama. He states the ETA for the new game is completely unknown, but that the environment is extremely favorable for a new America's Army, and they're considering new ideas and platforms. There is some talk about AAPG bugs and fixes, and then he confirms that Tots is no longer with the Army Game Studios. A little fanfare, and then we get the rationale between it, why Hollywood is now the community manager for America's Army. A little survey talk, then Hollywood admits that he wasn't really around for the AAPG beta. He does ask us how it was different from the full release version, which is a little troublesome because there was a lot of issues and discrepancies between the beta and the full release of America's Army Proving Grounds. Hollywood then confirms again that Tots is no longer with the Army Game Studios and talks about how they want to integrate social media into the game and use it as a tool. No one really knows what this means at this point. Whiplash then shares a link to an old America's Army 3 era forum that has 155 pages of suggestions, ideas for what America's Army PG could have been. This was pre-development on PG, and I was hoping to get community feedback into the new game. There are a lot of good items there. I won't read them all for you, but a lot of good information. He then states that the Trello board has been updated and longtime dev Tier has taken over those responsibilities and agrees with Hyperlight's government work joke taking way longer than what it should. Hollywood then goes on to say that PUBG was farted out in 6 months, talking about the development time for the new America's Army. States that about 3 years would be right. Hollywood then has some real talk with us, stating the Army Game Studios' goals for the game. 1, to market the U.S. Army in a positive manner. 2, to put eyeballs on the U.S. branding and marketing. And 3, to show the U.S. Army as high-tech. He kind of then goes on to talk about how many views just putting those loading videos on the PS4 version has gotten them, and that the main goal of this game is to advertise the Army, and that it doesn't even have to be on the PC or it doesn't have to be a shooter, that their main objective is to gain interest in the United States Army. There is some fanfare, talk about old forum bands, and then Hollywood talks about how they want to start sponsoring streamers, which is great. That's amazing for the game, and I hope it takes off. Hollywood again affirming their commitment to console versions of this game, and talks about stepping it out to different Army programs like ROTC. I know this was a big thing the era I was in high school. Our ROTC coach even talked about it. Games were released via CD-ROM or DVD-ROM at Army recruitment stations, and that's how a lot of people got the original America's Army. Download times, lots of people were still on dial-up, and download would take forever. So you would go to your local Army recruitment center, get your CD, kind of not listen to their spiel about joining the Army, and get home and play the game. Hollywood then goes on to talk about their strategy for streaming, just to get AAPG in front of more folks, get it in front of more eyeballs, and possibly more recruitment for the Army. There are some jokes, talks about ban removals. They discuss gun loadout differently per map, which was one of the characteristics of America's Army 2. Depending on what map you were on, you had a different primary rifle. Mount McKenna had the typical M16. Weapons Cache had the M4. Other maps like Sandstorm were SF based, so you get M268 aim point or the ACOG. I feel like this was one of the things that defined the original America's Army, and I don't think it's worth abandoning. He then goes on to talk about bringing some old maps back into the new game, which is a great idea. Map design is a really tricky thing to do. You can see it in other games like Counter-Strike. Dust 2 has been around for 15 years now at least. Once you get a good map layout and you have proper rushes for each site, different ways to transport, it's hard to beat. And Hollywood then goes on to discussing that they're not going to abandon PC, which is great. I started out in PC, a PC player, but it could very well stick to a console-only title. It's great to see that they're committed to keeping with the PC. Some other jokes. He describes why they didn't release Pipeline on PS4, talking about how there's frame rate issues. And they discuss kind of the comic background of the game and how Pipeline was initially not going to be released because in the comics it got blown up. So as someone who never read the comics or cared about the comics, this doesn't matter to me. I would much rather have a good, well thought out map than consistency in the comics versus the game. Some more talk about bugs, how to help keep out cheaters, making them require training for each account. He makes a little joke saying that they're listening now to community feedback. And they talk about revising old maps. This is something that they tried to do with Urban Assault, bringing it up to Harbor Assault. I think anyone that's played the two will agree that they're two completely different maps. They play completely differently. And I don't know if that's a direct correlation between the character size or the gunplay or just how far you can see. One of the things in AA2, it was really tricky to see across the map. I remember having the numpad binded to a whole different slew of gamma, contrast, and brightness schemes. And you would tilt your screen to the right to see to the end of the map. Otherwise, if you look straight dead on, it was foggy. So you could look away, kind of figure out where the enemy was, look back and shoot in that general area, and maybe deal 10 or 20 damage or so. some more nonsense where Hollywood seems confused about how the game is played on 32-bit. He knows a development on 64-bit, not extremely uncommon, especially when you're compiling. Talks about some more comics. Then he talks about Battle Royale. He says that they do play a lot internally with their team, and it has been tossed out, but they're trying to predict for the future. Since AA5 is going to be in development for many years, who's to know if Battle Royale is going to be a thing anymore? I mean, Fortnite's kind of swept everything and PUBG and stuff, but is it a long-term plan? No one really knows. There is some discussion around how people found the first American Army. Talk about advertisements in the local newspapers. Hollywood then goes on to talk about how money still needs to be figured out for this game and development will start after that. He dismisses comp mode here, which is a little disheartening. But then says that they need it for PS4, so that's a little confusing. Some talk about Battle Tracker, other talk about how you can harvest information from the game, a couple forum bans. He then again confirms that Tots is no longer with Army Game Studios, and that he's horse trading with the other Army Game Studios teams to get more people working on America's Army Proving Grounds and for the future America's Army 5. There's some more alpha beta phasing discussion. Hollywood kind of talks about how he wants to be the champion of our voice to the dev team. He doesn't want to be our boss or command us in any manner, which is great. We've been kind of looking for this for a long time. Tots was pretty restrictive for the community and shot down a lot of things that could have been very positive. Hollywood continues on with that he wants to promote more streamers, get out streamer kits. There's some more to talk about statistic stuff, the number of players on PS4 and how the PC player count is terrible. I mean, it's in probably like the 400 or 500 range most nights, peak players, which is pretty low for a PC game, but it is consistent. And that's one thing that AA has over a lot of other games. That there is a die-hard group of players that will continue to play it no matter what it is, and that's great. There is some points about how they want to advertise the game. Hollywood agrees and says that they'll put lots of funding into it. He then makes a joke about war games. He talks about the state of America's Army. So right now he says it's not even in development or talks. It's more BSing around the table, and it just goes to help show how early this is. That we are at the crisp of the America's Army 5 development. We get some America's Army Proving Grounds promises for how they plan to update the game in the near future, explaining why it's not on Xbox and only PS4. He states that Microsoft wants $2 million for it to be on their platform. Hollywood then goes on to kind of explain why he wants feedback from the community this early in the development cycle. He states that with this feedback they can figure out how to make the game, and if there's good ideas from the beginning they can promote them that are community supported. And if there's bad ideas, they can kill them and not waste time developing them or talking about them any further. Great news, Hollywood loves Pipeline. I think that's one of the best maps of America's Army 2 that is missing. There is some discussion how America's Army 5 will definitely be on the Xbox and that they will plan that extra $2 million in their budget. Some discussion on flashbangs and how that works. I feel like these mechanics are a little too early to start discussing through the game. But it's good to know that they're thinking ahead and that they understand how these mechanics work. There is some education for Hollywood of the current AMD GPU issues. I was a victim of this years ago, and I'm amazed it still wasn't fixed. I sent feedback to Cardigan as well as Tier back in the day. Then there is some miscellaneous stuff talking about incendiary grenades. Like I said, it's kind of too early, and the social hangout aspect. And I think that's more of a joke at this point. So that's all we know as of September 7th, 2018. I will plan to keep on covering any leaks or information put out by the development team at America's Army in the future. And let me know if you have any questions, feedback, comments, open for anything.